about this bag, but what happens is when it starts out, it looks just like coffee. It has coffee, it has a little bit of rice bran. That's what the actual mushroom seed comes in. They inoculate, they put the seed inside this rice bran, and therefore it allows it to grow very quickly. So on the first day, I mean, are we going to bring the laptop or no? We're not bringing it in?
I think you might bring it in.
Oh, okay, so we have some pictures also. I mean, literally, as soon as you put the coffee in this bag, it looks just like coffee. 2-3 days later, you start seeing out of these little rice bran, I mean, they look like
Pellets.
little pellets, exactly. So after 2 days, you start seeing little white stuff. I mean, little white stuff just start to take off. And it's called mycelium. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Paul Stamets. He's a big mushroom guy, big mushroom guru, and he wrote a book, just Mycelium Running, which basically talks about how the 6 ways that the mushrooms, or the mushroom mycelium, can save the world. He's actually did a TED speech too. It's probably something if you guys are interested in this stuff. It's really, really fascinating. So one of the things is that it's so aggressive, especially the pleurotus, the oyster mushroom, extremely aggressive. So you really, after 2 days, even after a day, you can start seeing this stuff it starts eating this stuff up. So as soon as, picture an open system where you're planting. So you have the 100-pound bin full of coffee, you add the rice bran, we add a little bit of supplements to it to increase the pH to our substrate. And then it's fair game for, fungi, bacteria, all types of fungi are competing here. So it's just a battle. It's pretty neat. I mean, everybody's trying to, beat each other out. Obviously, we're trying to, our goal as growers and farmers is to make the perfect environment for our fungi, i.e. our mushrooms, to grow. So, that's where the temperature control, the humidity control, the CO2 control comes in place. So if you go to our warehouse, there's supply fan that's all filtered in, so any bad stuff that's coming in, it's filtered in, so all the air that's coming is really pure. And then we have an exhaust fan that's pulling it out. We have fans, so there's air movement in the room in order to keep, we want to keep the temperature between 70 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's always very much temperature controlled, and then also humidity control as well. You want to be in between 40 to 60% humidity. Now this might get a little technical, we just, whatever, but I think after that, I think the next step is, and I'm a little sidetracked, I know, what was I supposed to answer? The compost, right? So it all comes back to really mushrooms end up being really aggressive, take over this stuff, and that's why it looks so white, and that's why it's basically thinking that the mushroom, and I'll get back to the compost, I just want to explain a little bit more into it, and then why it becomes so rich in protein. And the reason is because this mushroom, you're literally looking at mushrooms. This is mushroom. All this white stuff is a mushroom. It just doesn't have the cap. And the reason why there's a cap is a really neat fact about mushrooms, which I always thought was one of the most fascinating things about this, is that mushrooms only grow when they actually think they're going to die. So they're mushroom cap. And the reason is because when they start thinking, right now they're comfortable. In that bag, they're so comfortable. That's their perfect environment. They have the coffee taken over. That's their little niche. However, when you end up shocking them, which is the next step in our production, when you end up either by opening up the bags, that's almost good enough, especially with pleurotus, you end up allowing, all the CO2 gets released from the back, you allow oxygen to go in there, you end up making it a little more humid for them, then they freak out and they get scared. So what happens when they freak out, they say, we have to reproduce, and obviously mushrooms reproduce asexually, so they say, quick, let's release our spores. And how do they release their spores? Via their little caps. So what happens is, obviously, our goal is to grow as big of caps as possible without letting them grow too big, because then too many spores are released. Their shelf life decreases by like 2 weeks. So that's kind of the reason why mushrooms grow these caps. And
you punch the bags, and that's where they come out.
Yep. So on these ones, if you kind of see, we made 2 slits right here down the bags, and that kind of, like you said, releases the CO2. Oxygen comes in.
Got it. Does the mushrooms go through the plastic, or do you actually puncture the holes when they come out?
you put 2 slits. What we do is we put 2 slits down the side. We can maybe pass this one around too, and then.
So what made you size the bag as you did?
Say.
When you've got a size of mushroom content, how did you come up with that size?
We saw if it was
based on the bag, or
for us, we saw the thing about coffee makes it tricky to grow on it because it gets really dense. Normally, mushroom producers use sawdust, oak chips, things like that. And the coffee, because it's wet, it's kind of looks like a mud-like thing. So if it gets too dense, there's no air movement. So what we found for kind of like trial and error, 5 pounds was the most we could really fit per bag. before it got too dense and stuff wouldn't really grow. So it was more a matter of what we kind of figured out worked the best rather than the bag says.
I'm curious, so you're going around, you're collecting these coffee grounds from Peace and everything. How are you ensuring that there's no other funky stuff in there? How are you, your quality control of your raw material? I mean, people could put, who knows?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the biggest, steps coming in here, because a lot of times you go to like an espresso shop or a coffee shop, they're throwing a muffin in there, they're throwing a little, pastry in there. It's tons of and that stuff has a bacteria which will outcompete the oyster mushroom. So we started off with a lot of contamination and realized, I kind of, as a side fact, one of the neat things about the whole project is that the biggest cost for mushroom producers is sterilizing your substrate. Like the oak chips, the sawdust. We've got some mushroom farms, these huge tanks the size of this room with this, superheated, pressurized to sterilize the substrate. But the thing with growing on coffee, what kind of makes this whole thing so neat as a waste reduction kind of means, is that you're taking the substrate right after just boiling hot water is going through it from the coffee, which is 120 degrees, enough to pasteurize and sterilize it. And right now, they're just sitting there in a bag. The water goes through, coffee comes out, they put it in a bag, they tie it up. Absolutely perfect. And right now, it's just being thrown away. We came in here like, this is, there are some, right now, throwing some muffins and things like that. So we realized this is like 99% perfect. It's just, we have to kind of work with them. So with us, the nice thing of working with someone, like a Pete's store, is that we got their kind of top level management support down. So we made kind of initiatives in the back of all the rooms now. We've been working with them for a couple of months, and it says this is only coffee grounds. And it took a couple of weeks to kind of work through, but now to the point where it's just coffee. They love, we give them mushrooms. They love this whole thing too. So it's good. And then so.
Yeah.
Sidetracked over stuff.
Just to add to that, coffee's treated like a little queen. If you go to Starbucks, Pete's, all these guys, their biggest concern is how fresh it is. What the quality is, where is it coming from? Do we know exactly where it's coming from? Is there anything happening down in those farms? Everything's so. Picture every little bean that comes in. They know exactly where it's coming from. So it's very much protected and very much taken care of the whole step of the way. And what's surprising to us is that as soon as they have this boiling water, so it becomes extremely, it's perfectly pasteurized as soon as you have 10 minutes of boiling water having to go through this, especially when it's a very, it's very, very small amount. And then what they end up doing is just, they just take, one of the workers takes it, puts it in a plastic sterile bag, dumps it in, closes it, and every 30 minutes they keep refilling this. By the end of the day, they have 200 pounds of sterile stuff that's already after heating, some of the process that a mushroom producer has to go through is another 4 hours for it to cool down. So by the end of the day, it's cooled down, and it's perfect for us to take in, knot it up, and take it to a warehouse and start planting it. So that's why it makes it so. That's why it makes the process so beautiful and so simple in a way for us to really collect their waste, because it's exactly how we do it. If we were to add this step of the way on our end. So. And then we keep getting sidetracked from how this second product of ours came about. What's that? Yeah, let's pass that around.
If you chop it, you eat these, you leave it on the counter for another week, more will pop out?
Yeah, you actually can get 4 flushes out of this bag. So you harvest these ones, it takes a week of kind of dead period, and then it goes again. Week of dead period goes again. And the thing is, you get a little bit less and less flushes.
How long? What's the growth cycle? Like if we chopped all these up,
a week later, you have one more flush. That's the whole thing. Is 3 weeks incubation. After a week, you get a first flush. Then every week after that, you get a little bit smaller flushes. But you can get out of this bag, you probably get a total of 1 to 1.2 pounds of mushrooms. So pretty neat. It's quite a bit. It's a big bag of them. So fills you up. But just to kind of get back to what we were saying, the roots of these mushrooms. It takes this coffee, which was just coffee, and adds a lot of phosphorus, calcium, protein, nitrogen, really makes it a really, really nutrient-rich substance. So that's when we were like, we have 2,000 pounds a week of coffee that we've used to grow mushrooms on. What are you going to do with it now? And we started kind of reaching out to all these local farmers, and what we realized was that this stuff is actually really, really rich fungal compost. Like the mycorrhizins, the macronutrients, the stuff in here is some of the best compost material out there. So Alex and I are trying to think now, so we're providing a local food source to people. We have all this stuff that's another great product. We're not just going to dump it away. We have to kind of add it back to that loop and provide it back to consumers as well. So right now we're donating some of it to City Slicker Farms. It's like an urban nonprofit out based in Oakland. Has small farms. And we actually just kind of got our first deal with a local nursery in Berkeley called Berkeley Horticulture. where we're going to start actually selling this to local consumers too as good compost material for potting soil and things like that in the garden. So, you know, as of right now, you take a waste stream, you grow kind of nutritious food source for consumers, take your own waste and provide that back to consumers to kind of grow more food on it. We kind of see it as like a perfect closed loop, you know, zero waste business. And kind of what we're passing around too, just kind of add on to it, is this is kind of our third product, so to speak, that we're trying to, you know, provide consumers and people in our community, is the mushroom kits. You can do this at home yourself too. So we were actually at Whole Foods, and we're like, you know, they actually fell in love with these mushrooms. And they're like, what people actually want more than the mushrooms is take it one step even more local. You know, go from you guys growing it 5 miles away to they growing it in their own, you know, living room on the kitchen sink or something, you know, next to their kitchen. And so we kind of came up with, this is kind of our mock design, the first thing. You know, give these bags, kind of make them and provide them to consumers right at that right stage where they can grow it themselves. You guys have done the hard work of making sure it's taken it over, and now they can harvest a pound in their own kitchen. So that's really what these kits are that we passed around. And so, you know, people in the community can take these, their local waste stream, their local coffee grounds from the local Starbucks or Pete's or, you know, espresso shops, harvest their mushrooms and put that back in their soil, back in their gardens after they're done with it. So kind of taking that one step more local.
Okay, so that's like a 5-pound bag of coffee ground, and you could get 4 growth cycles of mushrooms. So roughly, how many pounds or ounces per 5-pound bag?
You get about a pound.
Total.
Total about a pound. You know,
About 1 pound per pot.
the first flush, and a pound, I mean, they're not very dense, so a pound ends up being about a bag this big.
But it'd be 1 to 5 ratio.
Yeah.
Every 5 pounds
Yeah.
of coffee ground stuff, you're going to get roughly about a pound.
Each time is less.
Each time is less,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, but the total.
The
out of
total, the
four
first
cycles-
flush, you'll be well, you'll get the most, or you'll yield the most mushrooms, and that'll be about half a pound. So,
Yeah.
So how long do you keep it in the dark?
Sorry?
How long do you keep them in the dark?
So that's 3 weeks. So that's kind of where it's, for us, like the most crucial stage, because once it's taken, once the mycelium, the mushroom roots have taken over, which is in this stage, that's kind of what the hard stuff's done. Like once it's like this, you're guaranteed to fruit this stuff. So for 3 weeks, it sits in this room, and you can kind of slowly, it starts off with a black bag, like Alex was saying, and then kind of slowly and slowly becomes more and more white. And after 3 weeks, we